Now let's take a deeper look at the photographs and X-rays taken at Bethesda Naval Hospital. Do they tell the truth, or are they hiding something? Let's let them speak for themselves. I believe the Parkland doctors told the truth about what they saw on November 22, 1963. The photographs and X-rays make it very clear that they did see a large hole in the back of JFK's head, but not in the occipital bone area, rather in the right parietal bone. The X-rays and photographs clearly demonstrate this, showing where most of the Parkland doctors pointed it out. Let's make drawings of three-dimensional skulls so we can see more clearly what these X-rays show us. We have one for the right lateral side and another for the front of the skull, and let's see the results. It should not be forgotten that these are only an approximation. More detailed work must be done later. The first thing we can observe in the lateral radiograph is a trail of lead splinters along the entry and exit path of the bullet and its fragments. This shows the entry path and the path of a bullet fragment that exited through JFK's forehead, exactly where his hairline begins and formed a V shape when his skull fractured. What is incredible is that what they made us believe was the point of entry for the bullet was a vile lie. The three-dimensional skull allows us to see the exact spot where the bullet penetrated JFK's skull, as will be seen later. Where the bullet penetrated, it fractured and dented the bone fragments without blowing them out, unlike what happened with the frontal bone fragments, which flew forward, as seen in the Zapruder movie. The bullet from the second shot, upon hitting the skull, fragmented into end parts, which, upon hitting different parts inside the skull, caused a large explosion in the upper part of it and mainly on the right side. We superimposed on JFK's skull X-ray, taken in 1960, the X-ray taken in Bethesda on the night of November 22, 1963, and we see how his skull fractured outwards on all sides, completely deforming his skull, which is why Jackie said that he didn't look like JFK afterward. The bullet strikes the skull almost tangentially, not perpendicularly as many assumed at the time. Therefore, the bullet does not primarily pierce, but rather crushes the bones through which it penetrates. This is the exact spot where a bullet fragment exited. Due to the lead fragments, the upward curving trajectory of this fragment exiting JFK's forehead is visible. As you can see, the bullet enters at a different point than the one all the forensic doctors have indicated as possible, and I understand why they do so. They know that if they tell the truth, they could lose their professional licenses and end up destitute. The small fragments of lead marked with great precision the path that the fragment followed, until it emerged from the forehead on the right side. Now let's see how the X-ray is drawn on a three-dimensional skull and what we can observe from this. By superimposing the X-ray onto the skull, we drew the fracture pattern so we could see it in 3 dimensions, and then compare it with the photographs of JFK taken on that date. This drawing isn't very accurate, but it serves perfectly to explain and compare the X-rays with the photographs in order to observe what has been so much discussed. At the back of the skull, we can see the blue entry point of the bullet from LHO's second shot. It hits almost tangentially and fragments into many pieces, which form a fan shape, represented by the 4 blue lines in the drawing. The upper part of the frontal bone flies through the air, as does the front part of the right parietal bone and part of the left. The red lines depict the fracture pattern, and the green lines indicate where large holes were left in the top of JFK's skull. In this view we can see where JFK lost the vast majority of the upper part of his skull, which we will compare with the autopsy photographs. The other blue lines represent the most likely directions of the other fragments that caused everything to come out forward and upward from JFK's skull. This is a close-up so we can see in more detail that large missing area of JFK's head, which will be compared with the autopsy photographs. The bone fragments furthest back from the head are those that remained hanging and stuck to the skin, as can be seen in these photographs. Here is a view of the trajectory and the frontal exit hole of the bullet fragment from the second shot. In these photographs, the yellow and white line represents the separation between the frontal bone and the right and left parietal bones, so that you can see how much was removed from each one. Let's look at a combination of the 2 photographs in order to see the tremendous hole they made in the president. You can see how his brain is clearly visible at the bottom. In the center, you can see the line that separates the 2 hemispheres of the brain, called the interhemispheric fissure, and hanging at the back, you can see fragments of bone attached to the skin, which is where the Parkland doctors said they saw a large hole in the back of JFK's head. Let's now compare the three-dimensional drawing with the photographs of JFK's skull. We see the enormous gap left by the exit wound from LHO's second bullet. At the bottom, the convolutions of the brain are visible, and at the back, bone fragments hang from the shreds of skin where they remain attached. In the following three photographs, we see the boundary between the frontal bone and the two parietal bones, in order to have a reference point for what is in front of and behind the head. We will see that a large gap is visible behind the right ear and upwards. Using blue, red, and white lines, we will outline the large gap above JFK's head in the three different photographs. Clearly observe how the gap is located far back, just as the Parkland doctors have pointed out for so long, and which can be clearly seen in the three-dimensional drawing. Let's look at the flaps attached to the scalp. At the moment the skull fragmented, these were sunk by the pressure of the bullet hitting the skull. All the doctors at Parkland point to that exact area, as can be seen in the photographs, the X-ray of the right side, and the three-dimensional drawing. Some of them, according to their position on the operating table, misinterpreted the exact position of the hole, which was not at all in the occipital region of the head, as all the photographs of JFK's head demonstrate. Skin flaps with skull fragments attached to them, which the doctors arranged to perform the X-ray, which we all know and which does belong to JFK. These would be the main trajectories of the bullet fragments from LHO's second shot. The fragments did indeed follow a curved trajectory, exiting upwards towards the front. For this reason, they mainly flew up and towards the front. This view from behind the ironwork would lead anyone to think that the back of JFK was completely blown up, which is false. Let's now look at the most probable curved trajectories of the fragments of the second bullet. The trail marked by the lead splinters of the fragment's trajectory is very evident and can be easily seen in this close-up of the radiograph of the right side of JKF's skull. With these two photographs, we can see how the doctors in Bethesda are arranging the bone fragments attached to the shreds of scalp. In order to take an X-ray of the head, they also arranged the bone fragment that was hanging in front of the right ear. The shreds of scalp that hung back from the head as seen in the photographs were pulled forward, and the bone fragments settled into place. Here we see them adjusting the fragment that was on the right side, viewed from behind, from the point where the bullet from LHO's second shot struck it. If they had shaved his head, this is what would be clearly visible. This is the point where the bullet from the second shot penetrates. That's why they've never been able to find the exact spot. The people at Bethesda must be laughing their heads off. The three-dimensional skull also shows the location of the impact point of LHO's second bullet and the possible trajectories of some fragments of that bullet. All of this is in perfect agreement with everything seen in the Zapruder, Nix, and Muckmore films. Everything is ejected forward and upward, and what falls behind the limousine in the trunk is what was ejected upward and then fell onto it as the limousine moved forward. I hope you will take the time to analyze all of this very patiently.